So joining us for more is Ray Boisvert, former Assistant Director of Intelligence for CSIS. He joins us now from Toronto. So what are you hearing about these 28 cases, Ray?
Well, Rashmi, there's not much that's been made available so far. One has to assume that there are 28 of the top priority cases that have been designated by the RCMP and/or CSIS. The number is, will probably build because we have declared 80 or so who've returned. And it probably means that those 28 represent the ones that had the profile that may indicate more of a greater chance that they would turn towards a violent action now that they're back home.
Would it just be their traveling that would make them high risk, or what sort of activity would fit them into that category?
Well, it'll be a combination of the methodologies that they bring to bear as investigators include a lot of technology, some advanced analytics, the sort of gumshoe work that's traditionally done, whether it's doing interviews, knocking on doors, and sometimes interviewing the subjects directly, which is usually a very good method. But it's also sometimes looking at some of the things they've said themselves. Perhaps these individuals have declared to others. Maybe they've done so on social media. They've said things, maybe threatening Canada, maybe threatening violence, explaining what they did overseas. And those are some of the gaps, of course, that enforcement agencies like the RCMP and investigative agencies like CSIS are trying to put together quickly to get at those who are likely to be the highest risk, highest profile.
The highest risk, the highest profile. And, we're being told that the threat is real. So a lot of people are wondering, why aren't we arresting these people? At what point would someone be arrested?
Well, we live in a society that has perhaps one of the highest thresholds for successful prosecution, and that's a good thing. So as a result, your law enforcement agencies are always cautious when they proceed with charges, especially on complex cases, and particularly ones where the national security I guess the framework around it relatively new, and the numbers of charges, the jurisprudence, in other words, the amount of legal cases around it is very, very thin. So prosecutors like to work closely with the law enforcement agencies to find and pick the best cases. The other big challenge is that most of that material evidence, including eyewitness accounts, is tens of thousands of kilometers away. So it's not like putting together a crime scene here in Canada. So it's a very difficult job to mount sufficient evidence to bring forward charges, and one that you have to be somewhat certain that you'll be successful in court.
And so is there anything else that can be done in tracking suspected terrorists within this country?
Well, I think the burden of responsibility falls to CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. It was created during the Cold War and was to keep an eye on spies and terrorists. And the idea is that they have a slightly lower threshold of investigation, and their job is to be the early warning system. So I think out of all those individuals, I suspect CSIS has the biggest burden to bear. All great in the sense that I think we have a good, successful system. We're batting 1,000 in Canada. We've thwarted numbers of plots. We've arrested lots of people, have lots of convictions. But the advantage always goes to the attackers. And the other thing Canadians have to recognize, too, this costs a lot of money. I mean, this is a very complicated system. And, of course, we're also working hard at closing some of the other gaps that remain, like the fact that people are still traveling over there and are likely or possibly will survive and want to come back after, adding to those 80.